Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Questions on British Muslim TV with me, Mohammed Shafiq. We're broadcasting on Sky Channel 752 and across social media at British Muslim TV. For those watching on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube, a particularly warm welcome. Now, wherever you are joining us, a very warm welcome. Tonight we want to hear from you. You can call us on 01924231083 or you can message us on British Muslim TV on Twitter and Facebook. Now, a few hours ago, in a Downing Street press conference, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced further restrictions due to the spike of COVID-19 cases, which will come into force on midnight on Monday. The restrictions announced as social gatherings above 6 people are banned in England. The law change will ban larger groups meeting anywhere socially, indoors or outdoors. It'll be enforced through a £100 fine if people fail to comply, doubling on each offence up to a maximum of £3,200. Now, schools, colleges, universities and workplaces will be exempt from the restrictions, as will places of worship. It comes after there's been a huge spike and huge anger over the lack of testing appointments and problems with booking an appointment, with some people being given appointments hundreds of miles away. Today, the Health Secretary Matt Hancock says more capacity in labs will be increased over the next 2 weeks. And with less than 8 weeks now to go until American voters go to the polls to elect a new president, with Republican nominee President Donald Trump running for a second term and Democratic Party nominee former Vice President Joe Biden hoping to cause an upset. Now, in some states, early voting has already started, but with the pandemic still ravaging various states, there'll be more postal voting than ever before. What impact this will have on the final result is yet to be known. But one thing is very clear, American voters are fired up in this election. Now, this week we once again focus on how racism and the systematic barriers faced by black people is a major talking point in this election. On one side, you have President Donald Trump and his Republican Party, who want to make law and order a key talking point in this election, wanting voters to focus on the looting, violence and rioting in some US cities, and they hope it will carry them to victory in November. President Trump is arguing only he can save America from the violence and rebuild the economy. And on the other side, you have Joe Biden and the Democrats, who want to make racial justice and equality a key policy point to get minority voters out to vote. Now, the first stage in this strategy has been the selection of Senator Kamala Harris of California, who's been selected as his vice presidential candidate. Harris is of African American and Indian heritage, and since she was announced as vice presidential candidate, millions has been raised and polls show a positive response to it. And the second stage is talk about a more equal society, how the institutional racism will be addressed and tackle the police violence towards African Americans and other minorities. Now, Americans have not been more divided as they are now, and the impact of current events will guide the discussion through this campaign. Now, clouding every discussion is the coronavirus pandemic, with over 6 million people affected across the United States and close to 190,000 deaths. The Democrats will make this record the heart of their campaign, with Republicans saying that only they will be able to rebuild after the pandemic. Now, in our second programme focused on the United States and the upcoming election, we focus on the impact of racism, Black Lives Matter and how much the pandemic will have on the final result. We discuss with our guest the impact of American Muslims on the result. Shortly, I'll be speaking to America's most prominent Muslim scholars about racism and the upcoming election, the impact of the Muslim vote in the battleground state of Michigan. In the second part of the programme, we head to Chicago, the home of former President Barack Obama's home city, to see how people are organising for the election and the impact of gun crime in the city. And then in the final segment of the programme, we talk to Cabinet member in Blackburn, Councillor Shokey Hussain, about the Prime Minister's new restrictions and how his town, Blackburn, is dealing with the virus increase. So the questions we are considering tonight: how has September the 11th affected your life? Has racism been overlooked in our national conversation? Who's going to win in November? The easy question: Donald Trump or Joe Biden? During the last 4 years, we've seen an increase in racism. What can be done? And with the US election less than 8 weeks away, what do you make of the campaign so far? Will the attack on immigrants and asylum seekers? Is it time for us to celebrate what a diverse society is achieving? And what do you make of Boris Johnson's announcement today? Are the new restrictions a consequence of people forgetting the impact of the virus? We want to hear from you tonight. You can call us on 01924 231 083, or you can message us on British Muslim TV on Twitter and Facebook. Now let's start our first discussion. Imam Dawud Walid, as I said, is one of America's most prominent Muslim voices, thinker and scholar. He's the executive director of the Council of American Islamic Relations in Michigan, Cllr. And the Council of American Islamic Relations Michigan chapter is a not-for-profit grassroots civil rights and advocacy group. Imam Walid has appeared on major news outlets across the world. He's given lectures and speeches around the world, and he's been recognized as a leading voice for American Muslims, and is an expert on Islamic history during the era of the Prophet ﷺ through the rightly guided 5 caliphs and their governments. I'm pleased to say that the Imam is joining us live on British Muslim TV from Michigan in the United States. Imam Dawud Walid, a very warm welcome to British Muslim TV.
Assalamu alaikum.
So 2 days before the September the 11th anniversary, what are your thoughts on that dreadful day and its aftermath?
Well, 9/11 was a major tragedy, not just for American Muslims, but I would say it was a double issue for us. One, as Americans, the attack that took place, but also smearing of Muslims in Islam and a number of governmental policies that began to target the American Muslim community. 19 years looking forward, I would say one of the biggest differences that we have is that shortly after 9/11, President George Bush went to an Islamic center in Washington, D.C., and said that the problem that took place here in America, or the tragedy of 9/11, that Muslims were not responsible for that this was a type of extremist ideology, a fringe, whereas now President Donald Trump has been involved in the wholesale smear and demonization of Muslims since he has been elected in office, starting with his very first act of the executive order banning Muslim travel from a number of countries and blocking Syrian and Yemeni refugees from entering into this country. And to this day, Syrian and Yemeni refugees, 3.5 years later, still cannot come into the United States.
Now, before we get started about current events, you touched on that just briefly in that answer. Tell us a bit more about yourself. You're one of America Muslims' most prominent voices, scholars and thinkers. Tell us a bit about your childhood growing up in Michigan.
Well, I was born in Michigan, but I was raised in Virginia primarily. I lived in New York for a little while, and then I went overseas and came back and settled here in Michigan, in the Detroit area. And Metro Detroit is one of the most densely populated areas of Muslims here in the United States of America. Just to give you a quick snapshot, here there's about 2.5 million people that live in this metropolitan area, with about 300,000 of them being Muslim. So this is probably the most Muslim-friendly place to live in America. But despite that, we still have a number of challenges that our community faces, from anti-Muslim bigotry, hate crimes, to the bullying of Muslim children in public schools here in southeastern Michigan.
Now, you've studied with some of the most prominent Muslim scholars around the world. When you're looking at your studies, what did you study and what did you learn from your studies?
Well, part of my studies, what I studied was, of course, the Usul-ud-Din, the basic creed of Islam, and along with that, Islamic grammar, morphology, as what's called the Balagha, the eloquence of the Arabic language, as well as Ulum al-Tafsir Quran, the science of interpreting Quran, as well as studying Islamic history. But one of the sciences of Islam that I lean towards most, that I've studied with my teachers, and not as much books, but more so face-to-face and tasting experiences with my teachers, would be the tradition of Islamic spirituality, which leads towards Islamic ethics, and we would call that tasawwuf. So this is primarily what I tend to focus on these days outside of my job. Care is how we discuss and refine the human soul so that we can have more ethical life as Muslims here in North America.
Subhanallah. And now Muslims are a prominent feature of Michigan life. What is life really like for Muslims, for British Muslims who are watching this?
So we have enclaves, similar to how you have there in Manchester and other places, where we have certain neighborhoods that are majority Muslims. So, for instance, Hamtramck, Michigan, which borders Detroit, is the only majority Muslim township in the entire United States. It's about 60% Muslim people who come from Yemeni background, Bangladeshi, African Americans, and Bosnians, and then not far away is Dearborn, Michigan, which is almost half Muslim, Muslims that come from Lebanon, Yemen, and Palestine predominantly. Then we have other areas where there are Muslims who are very small percentages that live amongst the broader society that are predominantly Christians, and really in these areas, and white Christians in particular, is where Muslims tend to face the most socio-political challenges, and these areas happen to be Republican-controlled areas as far as the local and state government.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dearborn, a city in Michigan of the largest concentration of Arab Muslims outside the Middle East. What are relationships like for Arab and African American Muslims?
So this area, as far as African American Muslims, the majority of African American Muslims live in the city of Detroit and Southfield. So the city of Detroit, in this area we live at, is considered to be the most segregated area in the United States of America. So there's a bunch of what we would say invisible walls. And unfortunately, Muslims have kind of copied the broader segregation of the broader society. So we have a majority Lebanese community of blocks, majority Yemeni blocks, majority West African blocks, African American blocks. So the leaders in the community have good relations, but there is some issues of racism amongst Muslims ourselves, including a campaign that I dealt with about 6 or 7 years ago, where I launched a public campaign for Arab Muslims to stop calling Black people Abid, which literally means slaves in Arabic. This is somewhat of a disturbing yet common term. The number of people from Lebanon and Syria for the Black people as slaves in Arabic language.
Sheikh, that's a really powerful point. We're just going to have to pause there because in London and surrounding areas, it's time for Azan-e-Isha. Obviously, for people watching around the country and around the world, please follow your local timetable. But for people in London, it's time for Azan-e-Isha. We'll come back and we'll continue to talk to our guest, Imam Dawud Walid. Join us on the other side of this.
This Azan is sponsored by SingleMuslim.com.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت سيدنا محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة والدرجة الرفيعة وبعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وأته وارزقنا شفاءته يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
O Allah, owner of this perfect call and owner of this prayer to be performed, bestow upon Muhammad al-Wasila and al-Fadila and send upon him a raised platform which you have promised him. Verily, you never fail in your promise.
This Azan was sponsored by SingleMuslim.com.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to British Muslim TV's Questions programme with me, Mohammed Shafiq. My special guest joining us from Detroit in Michigan in the United States is Dawud Walid. And we were talking to him just before the break about that friction, if you like, and that racism that exists within some elements of the Muslim community towards African Americans. Dawud, your advocacy for African Americans has been a powerful tool to inspire people. Why have you chosen to be involved in community activism?
Well, I believe that community activism is actually an Islamic obligation under what we have in our usul called al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, meaning to enjoy the good and forbid evil. And this is something that our great scholars from Al-Ghazali to Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, may Allah be pleased with them both, wrote about this. So this is part of our tradition. And spiritually speaking, the Prophet, alayhi salam, his heart always inclined towards the du'afa, or to the weak or the marginalized. So he had a message of universality in calling people, irrespective if they were aristocrats or the poor, but he inclined himself more towards the marginalized and the oppressed, and was not as concerned about being cozy with the oppressor class. So I believe that this is very prophetic, that we are involved in trying to right the wrongs in society and to bring about more justice, as our prophet, beloved peace be upon him, talked about in his farewell pilgrimage, that the white is no better than the black, nor is the black better than the white, and the Arab is not better than non-Arab, vice versa. That it is piety that we should judge people by the content of their character, not treat people unfairly because of their skin color.
Now, Donald Trump has been in office for nearly 4 years. What do you make of his record in regards to Muslims and minority communities?
Well, I divide that firstly domestically and internationally. So when you look at the domestic front, it's rhetoric towards not just Muslims, be they black or non-black, but people who are non-white in general has been very divisive. He's continued some of his language and policies that he ran on, referring to Latinos and Mexicans in particular in very bad terms, but also people that come from Central America. His language about African people and what he called nations in Africa is quite horrible, to say the least. And a number of the policies that President Barack Obama put forward, including executive orders to protect undocumented immigrants who were brought here as children, he undid that very early. So he's had a horrible record in terms of civil rights relating to people who are not white. In regards to his foreign policy issues and his stances, and I made reference to his statement in regards to Africa, but what he did in terms of moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is quite unprecedented, and is what he's been doing with President Netanyahu himself is a controversial figure in Israeli politics, that he would strike a deal, and now he has a city named after himself, Trumpville, and occupied Golden Heights, which is really Syrian land. That just goes to show the type of radical foreign policy stances of President Trump and who he aligns himself.
Now, Vice President Joe Biden, former Vice President, the Democratic nominee, is actually in Michigan today as we speak. Donald Trump is there tomorrow. What do you make of the Democratic and Republican campaign so far?
Well, I think the Democratic Party has to do better, because the primary talking point of the Democratic Party has been not Trump. And I see this in particular in the city of Detroit. Detroit is America's black city. It's 80% African American, and it is the poorest major city in the United States of America. And in order to get out the black vote, that President Biden or Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris have to do more in the grassroots of the black community and the Latino community, I would say, to get out the vote. Just say Trump is bad, because that's not enough incentive to get people out to vote. Because
Cllr, Michigan, is a non-party organization, not-for-profit. How are you working to register minority voters and ensure that they actually get out and vote?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because we aren't allowed to endorse candidates based upon law, given that we're an organization. We have been involved in get out to vote campaigns. Now, obviously, right now, because of the COVID-19 issue, it is somewhat harder for us to get out our message, but we are telling people to know their rights to vote. We are encouraging people actually not only register, but to do the mail-in votes, but to not simply wait a couple of weeks before the election, but to actually take them and hand deliver them to their local places where the county clerks are at. So we are involved in those types of issues. But we also have, and we will be releasing next month, a legislative scorecard. Basically, we grade incumbents on their civil rights record based upon certain issues. So we don't endorse candidates. At the same time, we let people know how certain candidates voted on civil rights issues while they were in the State House or in Congress, as well as the president.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Now, Donald Trump, he won Michigan for the first time in 2016. Is that a failure of African-American voters, minority communities who failed to vote for Hillary Clinton and Democrats?
Well, voter turnout was lower amongst African-Americans and Democrats in general. And I think it wasn't simply because of great work of Trump, or Trump mobilized the vote. It was simply that people just didn't like Hillary Clinton. And in the primary here, actually Senator Bernie Sanders won the state of Michigan in that primary 4 years ago. Hillary Clinton did not win. So Hillary Clinton was just Senator Clinton was a very unlikable candidate, and people just didn't trust her.
Okay. And as you travel around the country, I know you're not traveling now because of the pandemic, but when you travel around the United States, what are American Muslims telling you about their lives?
Well, there's a level of issues that relate to certain anxieties. And one anxiety that many American Muslims feel is the rise of white supremacist and white nationalist groups, and not only in political rhetoric, but increasement of violence. And we can see that right after President Trump was elected, that there was an unprecedented spike in those weeks of hate crimes against non-white people. Muslims were also victims of those hate crimes. So one of the concerns is that if he gets elected, will white nationalists and white supremacists feel even more emboldened to basically feel they can do whatever they want to do in their enclaves in certain communities?
Now, when you look into the future, what does the next chapter in your life hold?
Well, Allah knows best. We have to see how things are going, but I just plan on continuing to do my work. Actually, I've been involved in writing a number of books or co-authoring books. I have some other book projects that are coming out. One for your readers is I have a book that's due to come out, printed by a publisher in the UK, that will be entitled Blackness in Islam. And so look out for that, and that should be out by November 1st, talking about some of the black companions and some of the notable people of Ahlul Bayt.
Yeah,
also the Prophet sallallahu alaihi
wasallam. That's a really powerful book. I'm really looking forward, and maybe we can get you back on to talk about your book when it's time to publish. Now, I promise you my final question. Who is going to win in November, Trump or Biden?
Allah knows best, but I can say this, that if voter turnout is low, and if Trump wins Michigan, Trump gets a second term in the White House. So that's my forecast, but Allah knows best.
Yeah, mashallah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Imam Dawud Walid. It's been a great insight for our viewers into the lives of American Muslims. Allah bless and protect you, and best wishes from us here in the United Kingdom. That was Imam Dawud Walid from the Michigan in the United States. Now, what we're going to try to do is take some of your calls. I promise you we will take some of your calls, and I never get the chance. Number is on your screen now, 01924231083. The three key questions: one is about the American election. The second is really around Boris Johnson and his announcement today. This announcement at 4 o'clock from Downing Street, where he announced further restrictions across England. Remember, the Prime Minister only making the announcement in regards to what happens in England. Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland have devolved governments, and therefore the individual First Ministers will make announcements in regards to that. But so what are the restrictions? Just remind you what they are. No more than 6 people can meet together, either indoors or outdoors. If you flout that rule from Monday at midnight, so Sunday night, if you flout that rule, you could be fined £100, and for multiple offenders, you could get fines, fines up to £3,200. And the Prime Minister is saying, the language he was using was very simple. He feels as if the relaxation of the rules hasn't helped, and we've seen a spike of cases in the last few days of over 7,000 since Sunday, which is causing huge concern. And then there's the issues in regards to testing. I tried to book a test just for the programme tonight to see if I could get a test. I couldn't get a test. There was no capacity. And that's a real issue which Keir Starmer in Prime Minister's Questions raised, and Boris Johnson pushing back. As I said at the top of the programme, Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, talking very much about increasing capacity in those labs so that they could increase testing. And it's time for our first break. When we come back, we head to Chicago, where former US President Barack Obama started his political career as a community activist. Join us on the other side of this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Salam personal.
رسول الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه
رسول الله حبيب الله.
What does it mean to follow the Prophet, peace be upon him?
رسول الله رسول الله.
Be content with that which you have been given. You will be the richest of people.
رسول الله.
Looking for a creative, engaging and fun way to teach your children Islam and Islamic values? Introducing Ma'raj Stories, an app-based digital library that contains high-quality multimedia content designed to provide meaningful digital experiences for children of all ages. With Ma'raj Stories, children can access Islamic-themed animated stories, mini-games, audiobooks, puzzles and more. All available through monthly and annual subscription packages, so you can choose the plan best suited to your needs. Download now.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. Now, for the final part of our tonight's programme, we will be talking to Councillor Shokey Hussain about the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's announcement for further restrictions here in England. What impact is it having on the people of Blackburn, East Lancashire and the wider country? The number you can call is now on 01924231083, the cost of a standard local call, and in most cases free from mobile phones. Now, Chicago has been a hotbed for community activism for decades. It's where former US President Barack Obama started his career as a community activist, going on to be elected as senator in the state and ultimately to the White House as president for 8 years. Now, Chicago has seen its most violent month in 28 years as murders, shootings skyrocket. Chicago has reported 105 murders in July. This is more than double the 44 recorded in July 2019. And over 584 shooting victims is also up dramatically from the same period in 2019. With 308 reported in July, July was the most violent month in 28 years. Now, with the murder of George Floyd and protests across the United States, what can the African American community do to be inspired to get up and to vote, to register to vote and to partake in the democracy? Let's talk to our next guest. He's a resident of Chicago. He's an activist, outreach worker for Cllr Michigan. Cllr in... I get my states mixed up. He's in Chicago, which is Illinois. And Gerald Hankerson is my special guest. He's joining us live now on British Muslim TV. Gerald, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the programme.
Wa alaikum salam.
So let's get stuck in, if you like. Barack Obama was president of the United States for 8 years. He came from Chicago. He did a similar job to you as a community activist. What would you make of his record as president for 8 years?
Thank you for having me on the show, Brother Mohammed. For the most part, with the Muslim community, he's seen as being respected. Someone that did make outreach efforts much stronger to the Muslim community. However, there are some remarks on his in several ways. First, particularly in relation to a lot of 9/11 legislation, either extended or made a new for the so-called war on terror. Part of the interest is a lot of the drone strikes that were held under his administration. Also, a lot in terms of Israeli relations, and even one event, Ramadan, really taking it to the Muslims, reminding us.
Gerald, we're having a slight problem with your line there. I think it may be your internet connection. Let's see if we can sort that out with the studio. Whilst we're waiting to carry on the conversation with Gerald, let's give you that number now, 01924231083. Donald Trump going up against Joe Biden in the US election. It's on November the 3rd, Tuesday, November the 3rd. And obviously it's a historical election and Donald Trump's going for his second term. Joe Biden wants to be back in the White House, not as vice president, but as president. Gerard, before we talk about current events, I'd really love to hear about your story, your journey into Islam.
Sure. I've now been Muslim over 20 years, actually in April 1998, when I was 16 years old. The story brief, I've always been looking for my own personal spiritual path and connection with God. For me in my youth, God was always very much in my life, very conscious of him. However, my family did not go to church regularly. So I believe that kind of allowed a great curiosity in terms of how I could have my relationship with God. My first introduction to Islam was a really positive one. So I recall the second grade reading about prayers being 3 times a day. And that was a really cool thing. And then just these piecemeal but very important facts, either about figures in Islam or just about religion in general, I kept being spoon-fed. Ultimately, the main change, by the time I got into high school, I was really influenced by the life of Malcolm X. I watched the movie that was by Spike Lee in 5th grade, and that left a very profound impact on me. And I learned it was based on his autobiography. I didn't get a chance to read that my junior year of high school. It really set a lot of focus for me, particularly what happened with him in his era in 1964 was still the same state of Black America in 1988.
Yeah.
And I was left with the question if Islam could be a solution to some of the ills. Not that it's really saying that all blacks should become Muslim, but it was really inspiring to me. And I had a best friend for the Nation of Islam who ultimately was kicked out. And that led me to say if I ever became Muslim, I would not join a nation. What did that mean? And so I started exploring why I even asked the question.
Like a similar journey to Malcolm X. He was very much similar journey.
Yeah, and so for me, I came from a home where I had 2 parents. I did well in school, so it wasn't necessarily where there were like troubles, things that sort. But similarities do lie, and that was definitely on a personal quest. And I had other influential people in my life that really share the joys and sweetness of Islam. So,
that's really important.
As a 6-year-old, that was really life-changing.
Gerard, I promised we could take some of our callers. Let's go to the lines. Let's 01924231083. And the WhatsApp number is on the screen as well, 07950797017. Just put your message there. We'll get through some of those messages as well. And there's loads on social media as well, which we can get through. Let's go to line 1. Assalamu alaikum. You're live on British Muslim TV.
Walaikum assalam, brother. I like your program, and I would like to ask the brother we're questioning that Donald Trump isn't a good person to work with, because he's not doing much about Black Lives Matter. But I would urge the brother to stand against him, because the brother will do a better job in future for Black lives and better the country for the Democrats, if he would like to answer my question. And also I would like to say I pray for him if he stands. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Getting support there already, Gerard, from UK viewers for your political journey. I know you work for an organisation which is non-political and it's for not-for-profit. So according to statistics, there's between 300,000 and 500,000 Muslims who live in Chicago. What is life like for Muslims in your city?
It's very vibrant. It's definitely one of the largest populations here in the United States, and actually more established. Of course, for the past 4 decades, there have been some growing pains, whether there's challenges to mosque, be able to expand or build brand new, definitely in day-to-day life, in terms of accommodation, in terms of just even having access to going to the store or employment benefits. So there are some ways that our organizations that have been able to be established really were at the forefront of making life better for Muslims. And so a lot of the national organizations and even some local branches like Chicago have been really able to anchor not only as foundations for the Muslim community, but definitely in collaboration with other organizations, places of worship, even local and state government.
Yeah. So what do you make of Donald Trump? He's been in the White House for less than 4 years, coming up to 4 years. How do you assess his record for the last 4 years?
It's very hard to really find something positive for him, even though there could be some empirical evidence to point to some benefits to his presidency. But by and large, the Islamophobia, racism, the xenophobia has been really glaring. And it's very hard to see in other aspects of his presidency. For example, so-called best unemployment numbers under the president, but they're still very much marked underemployed for many members of the Black community, as well as other communities. So there's always certain nuances that are not really discussed by him, or he really sings his own praises. So a lot of efforts that he cannot take full credit for. A lot of organizations, activists, and of course even state and local governments, that has played a part in benefiting lives for many Americans. So moving forward, it'll be really interesting to see, because if he is reelected, what happens during the second term is presidents become more ambitious, and they take up more legislation and policy making efforts. And so that's something to really mark for. And if the Muslim travel ban and the African travel ban, as it's called, are any indications of that, including the moving of the embassies to Jerusalem, things like that really kind of give us pause. Muslim Americans, I think many Americans across many communities also fear.
Yeah, and now obviously the rise in violence you see in your city of Chicago, we talked about the massive increase of shootings from 308 last year. It's now gone up to 584. It's a massive issue. How are people in your community facing up to the challenge of gun crime and people losing their lives?
So the first thing I could say, which is I think is sadly sometimes even over-exaggerated, is that it's across the entire southwest side of the city where prominent numbers of Black community members live. It's really concentrated in certain areas, but unfortunately the media and even certain politicians and other influential people mask it as it's just rampant. But that's not to discredit the numbers, and particularly that very staggering figure that jumped up from efforts to decrease crime. So for the most part, in terms of there's other community organizers that's really invested in breaking down the violence from different ways of conflict resolution to community alternative policing strategies. That's an organization known as a partnership between Chicago Police Department and local organizers. But by and large, really about holding our own community accountable. So one of the things that's often talked about with the so-called black on black crime is that we're not doing enough to hold our community members responsible. That we allow this snitching, the no snitching culture, and none of that is true. But I would say that for the most part, a lot of community members like myself, a lifelong Chicagoan, there are definitely ways we have been within our own community making it work.
Okay.
But there's definitely something more that all of us can do, especially in light of the staggering number that has been exponential.
Now, Republicans would argue that more black people are dying from gun crime in your city, yet where are those protests? What would your reaction be to what the Republicans are saying?
There's so much put it in the systemic institutional racism, not only in Chicago, but in many other metropolitan areas across the country, and even in places that we don't necessarily really explore much more deep. For the most part, while we can look at Chicago as one of the main cities that have these issues, there's a lot of policies that the Republican Party have really let fester for the worse. So we are right next door to the Illinois-Indiana border, for example. There's a lot of port areas where a lot of drugs and guns travel through Indiana, which has more relaxed laws, and definitely not necessarily have a wherewithal from the Republican governors that we had in the past, as well as other jurisdictions that are under the leadership of GOP leaders.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we're talking about this current pandemic. There's a great difference here. There is no vaccination that will, let alone even if we have one, what's to do about mass administration to people. There's a lot of people who are essential workers, and these essential workers are mostly in the black and brown communities that do not have access to health care, protective safety, and such. So a lot of things that we need to also look at beyond so-called black on black crime, which is really not existing.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the emergency workers. Same here in the UK. Most of the people on the front line are from black and minority communities. Now, when I say Black Lives Matter, what does that mean to you?
It definitely means that black lives are just as important as someone who identifies as white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, heterosexual. And what's more interesting is that it has never at all excluded any other lives in our country, let alone around the world, since it has become this global consciousness. So for me, I am very much sensitive to any individual that wants to better understand the experiences of black people, but also understand that a lot has to deal with starting with self within our communities. So when I hear all lives matter, that takes me back to a dismissal of very critical facts about how the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, and de facto other institutional racist policies still really makes it where so many stats across the board in terms of wealth, jobs, education, healthcare, have been abysmal practically for the entire existence of African descent in the United States.
Yeah.
So it's never been an issue for me to understand what Black Lives Matter mean. And I'm very happy that more people who are not African or African descent also understand that and stand with us in solidarity and allyship.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I'm really proud of the fact that here at British Muslim TV we had spent 4 weeks in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder looking into those issues and featuring and celebrating black history and black contributors. So we're really proud of the fact that you're here with us tonight. Now, black communities and other minorities, not just in your state but across the United States, are often not registered to vote. What are you and your organisation doing to change this?
So there's so many different facets to making sure that people are registered to vote. So it even before someone can fill out the form, just to have the cognizance of what the history of civil rights that's related to voter empowerment really means. So for our organization, we're doing different facets, and there's some things that are efforts in terms of Care Chicago, broadly of civic engagement, we connect with other partners, both within the Muslim community as well as other civic leading groups. So definitely voter registration is one, but definitely the education on particular policies, not only what's happening in Washington, D.C., but also with our state and local jurisdiction. There's a great deal of concern when it comes to foreign policy, maybe education, that's the word, but of particular interest to us is really understanding how all different laws have an impact, not just on what is important to me, but the entire communities surrounding, because it does have an effect. So we do various types of events, from town hall forums to panel webinars. Also, for example, we have the upcoming presidential and vice president candidate debates. So there will be watch party.
Yeah, because
do something more specific in looking in particular legislation that has either very detrimental or could be promising for all Americans, not just solely Muslim or Black Americans or any other one community.
Now, there's been a lot of outreach to the American Muslim community by the Donald Trump and Republican Party. What's your reaction to that outreach?
That's not a surprise to me. This could be standard for any major political party. And I think this is where there could be some scrutiny said about the Democratic Party as well. People know that numbers mean, and so I think there's some cognizance with the Trump administration or the Trump election committee to understand that there's the conservative values, which they try to often associate with being Republican, but also, again, the economy. There is a significant number of high-collar, professional workers in the Muslim community. So, of course, doctors, engineers, lawyers. And so it's not really too surprising to try to appeal to that base in terms of less taxes. And now with the sort of conversation that Trump is having about people invading the suburbs, where a lot of these also are very well established. But my guess would be that there's still ongoing conversation about what it means to target Muslims because of Islam being bad people, or even worse, have no place here in the United States. My hopes would be that the Muslim community will rise up and be more questioning of that.
Now, as part of your work as an outreach campaigner, you've brought Muslims and Jews together in your city. Why is interfaith so important?
We're very blessed to be in a city that has a very pivotal role in what is considered like a modern faith engagement movement. So you think back to the 1893 World Fair, where it's the birthplace of the Parliament of World Religions, and that reconvened 100 years later in Chicago. And it really helps set a basis for what it means for the various faiths here to really understand one another's space, but also accepting that there are differences, but where we can come together and really make the best of our lives here in Chicago. So my previous work with the Jewish community, which is still existing, of course, has really focused on that we understand that this Israeli-Palestinian conflict is very heightened, very real, even for our community members here. But that should not negate the similarities between our faiths, and particularly what life means for us here. So we definitely embarked upon tech studies, cultural events like African John, also understanding that there's certain social justice actions that we can come together and support. So I'm happy that Chicago has been one of the leading cities when it comes to Muslim and Jewish initiatives, and just across the board with other faiths, and including people with no faith affiliation.
Okay, 01924231083 is the number if you want to get a question in there or your comments. So tell us, what does the future hold for American Muslims?
A strong one. More than ever, Muslims are being involved in many aspects of life. So in terms just of civic engagement, there are more Muslims running for office. Just had a staff meeting earlier today. We were talking about how a prominent Muslim attorney who was running for a judgeship here is now being attacked. So usually that's one positive sign, is when you're attacked, that you're doing something right. You're really making new grounds. And I find that in other arenas, what's really important, particularly in line with my work, is looking at where most youth and young adults are being influenced, how they're welcome to the table. Is something to really note that the ones that are now entering college, these are young adults that were not either born or too young to understand what happened on September 11, 2001. But these are the individuals that are sadly inheriting that legacy, where they have to defend Islam, that they have to pretty much reject any type of associations with terrorism, jihadists, etc. But at the same time, their peers who are not Muslim are the ones that also, unfortunately, continuing the Islam, the hatred, discrimination, stereotypes, and prejudice. So there's a lot where people are now entering different fields like journalism, the arts, and definitely on the other hand, making sure that we are not in these silos in our communities anymore. So there's more engagement, but also just other areas where we can build strong solidarity and allies. And I think that in and of itself, looking past 20 years, it would be really phenomenal to see where Muslims are.
I promise you my final question. Who's going to win in November, Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
Wow, great question. Because one, I'm still shaking up from what happened in 2016. So hard lessons are not necessarily rely on pollsters. And as you know, Chicago is a nonpartisan organization, so we stay pretty clear of that. However, we have the right to call out elected officials and other public figures who disparage Islam and the Muslim community and any community in terms of justice and civil rights, our Constitution. So on that note, some polls do reflect the strength for Biden, but we keep seeing these other variables such as the economy.
It's a lot closer in the sort of battleground states, isn't it? Well, thank you so much, Gerald Hankerson. It's a pleasure talking to you. We wish you well. Keep safe, sir. And maybe, inshallah, we'll talk to you after the election to see if your prediction came through. Thank you so much joining us there from Chicago in the United States. Thank you so much for being my guest. And really, in the final part of the programme, we talked to Councillor Shokey Hussain. He's an assistant cabinet member in Blackburn. As you know, Blackburn was one of those early towns that saw a massive spike in positive cases, and there were restrictions that were brought in. And on the day that Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, announces significant changes to COVID-related restrictions in this country, in England only. So if you're in Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, devolved governments will make their own announcements. But in England, no more than 6 people can congregate both indoor or outdoor. There are severe restrictions that have been brought in the city of Bolton. All hospitality places have been forced to close between the hours of 10 o'clock in the evening and 5 o'clock in the morning. That, I suppose, is to curtail the rise of the case in Bolton in particular, according to Matt Hancock, the health secretary, is down to the spike in pubs. And therefore, that decision to close pubs and restaurants is an issue. And Councillor Shokey Hussain has been involved at a grassroots level to react to what is happening in Blackburn, but also to provide that civic leadership because he's a member of the council, he's a councillor, but he's also in that committee. And we'll talk to him. We'll take more of your calls on 01924231083. What do you make of Boris Johnson's new announcement? Join us on the side of this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Let's talk about love, real love. Not love that you swipe for, but love that you fight for, that Khadija Muhammad love. Love that you can't squeeze into a tweet or Facebook post. No filters, no hashtags, that sent from above love. Mawadda and Rahma love. That love that needs no words, away with the birds. That let me be your cover love. Care and protect each other love. A glimpse of heaven. Out of 10, I'd give it 11. Real love. Love that you dream about. Wake up and read about. That butterflies in your tummy love that makes you blush. Makes your palms sweat without needing to touch. Turning a macho man into mush. That happily ever after love. Let's talk about love. Real love.
Join us for Behind the Headlines as we interview influential guests from around the world regarding the topics that matter to you. Behind the Headlines, each and every week with me, Ahmed Boston, only on British Muslim TV.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV, Sky Channel 752 and across social media, wherever you are. We hope you're enjoying the programme. Now, as we've been telling you throughout the programme, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson making that announcement this afternoon from Downing Street about the restrictions of COVID-19 related restrictions. So what is the key message from that? No more than 6 people can gather either indoors or outdoors. At the moment, it's 30 in some places, and therefore that's going to go way down. And there's going to be added pressure on pubs, restaurants, to make sure that they keep the names and addresses and phone numbers of people so that they can be traced if something happens. And there's been a lot of confusion about the testing capacity in the United Kingdom. As I told you at the top of the programme, Matt Hancock saying the capacity will be increased at another lab, and it's down to the fact that the labs are operating at full volume. Yet if you go to one of the test sites, they look relatively quiet. And I tried this afternoon to book a test. I was unsuccessful. And a colleague of mine booked a test and was told he could have an appointment, lives in Manchester, but he can have an appointment to go to Inverness. For those of you who do not know, north of Manchester, it's a long way away to Inverness, probably about 4.5, 5 hours drive there. So about 10, 11 hours. But anyway, so these are the announcements. And what Boris Johnson is clearly saying is we all need to play our part. Yes, we've taken a foot off the pedal. Yes, we've become too relaxed. Everybody, we need to step up because these spiking cases is affecting not just small towns and cities, but actually affecting all over the country in England. And that's why he's introduced it. Now, my next guest is Councillor Shokey Hussain. He's a assistant cabinet member in Blackburn. And you remember when the restrictions were introduced in Blackburn, when there's a massive spike, we spoke to him then. Councillor Shokey Hussain, a very warm welcome and welcome to British Muslim TV again.
Assalamu alaikum.
So let's talk about what's your reaction to what the Prime Minister announced today?
I mean, to be honest with you, Blackburn 8 of special measures anyway. So it makes much difference to us. We can't limit anybody else.
Yeah.
So rule of 6 would be applying to.
Okay, well, we're just having a real problem with the lines tonight, so my apologies if you are watching this and struggling to follow the programme. I do apologise. Shokey Hussain, we'll come back to you in a second once we get that line sorted. If it's easier, maybe we can get you on the phone. Maybe we can get you on the phone. I think that might work slightly better. If the control room could introduce that, that'd be really grateful. So as I said, 01924 231 083 is our number. And the WhatsApp number is 07950797017. I'm getting a lot of interference in the line to you, Shokey. I don't know if you can hear me.
I could.
Yeah. It's not a very good line. Shokey, stay there. I do apologise for this. Let's see if we can sort the connection. Control room, if you can get him on the phone, I think that might work better. So if you hang up, Shokey Hussain, we'll ring you from the studio line. Whilst we're doing that, if you could come to a single screen, that'd be really, really useful. The number is on your screen now, 01924 231 083, 01924 231 083. Apologies for the connection this evening. We'll try to get Councillor Shokey Hussain on the phone, so at least we'll be able to hear him more clearly. Now, as I said, the Prime Minister making that announcement this afternoon in a Downing Street press conference, and there's been a massive increase in the town of Bolton, just up the road from Blackburn, and we've seen a massive increase, and therefore the restrictions that have been brought in there are a lot more severe than they are in the rest of the country. So hospitality industry, which includes takeaways, restaurants, bars and pubs, will not be able to open after 10 o'clock till 5 o'clock. They have to remain closed from 10 o'clock in the evening to 5 o'clock. And in terms of those restaurants, they will not be able to have seating for customers. They'll only be allowed to open up for delivery and takeaway collections. Now, if you're in Bolton, that's a huge change. And they're seen, I think most people really followed the rules in March. They understood the severity. You would probably know somebody who's died. You probably know a neighbour or a family member who caught the virus and survived or didn't survive, tragically. So people understand the severity of that. But as we've come through the summer, the government guidance has changed. It's relaxed. People have become more relaxed in terms of going out there and trying to get on with their lives. And that has had an impact. We know that there's been a massive scale. I think yesterday we had 295 schools that were showing positive reports in terms of their children or their teachers. And that's a big worry, because obviously there's been a big push to get children back to school. Now, as a parent of 4 children, I was really excited this week when my kids went to school, back to school, but a bit apprehensive about the decision, because tonight in the primary school where my kids go, the teacher, head teacher, just reported that one of the children has tested positive. And that's why it's so important, as we deal with this issue of the coronavirus, that we step up testing. And that's why this big worry about you not being able to go online and book a test, the drive-through or the walk-in, is a big issue, because if we can't test people, we can't accurately understand what is happening in communities. Now, some of those exemptions that we have to the guidance that was issued today, there is an exemption for places of worship. So this is a question which wasn't very clear in the statement that was released to the journalist. We got the statement about 9 o'clock last night, and there wasn't a clear understanding. There was talks about schools. Here it is: schools, colleges, universities and workplaces will be exempt from those restrictions. But there was nothing about places of worship. Now, I tried to speak to Downing Street yesterday and nobody was able to give me a definitive answer. And then when the Prime Minister spoke this afternoon at 4 o'clock, we got a clear picture that because the places of worship are COVID-19 protected, then that meant that they would be exempt from that. Funerals and weddings are also exempt from that. And that's really interesting. As you see, you can have a funeral, you can have a wedding, maximum of 30 people. That will continue as long as they maintain social distancing. I don't know if Councillor Shokey Hussain is back on the line. Do we know if he's back? Okay, thank you very much, sir. So what we want to do is just take some more of your calls, 01924 231 083. A few questions coming through in social media. One is about, somebody's asked about the mosque. Well, as I said, mosques are exempt from this because all of the mosques and places of worship, churches, synagogues, temples, have done some real hard work over these past few months to make sure that they were ready, that they're COVID protected. So if you go to a mosque, for example, you will see space out, in terms of social distancing, people wearing masks, making sure that their name, address and phone numbers are registered with the mosque. So if there is a spike, the NHS tracers can trace people quickly. And then there is concern, if you like, about what is happening in Bolton, in Manchester, in Rochdale, in some parts of Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire. Those figures, having gone down for the last few weeks, have gone up again this week. And that feeds in to the data which ministers would have been looking over. The scientists, you saw at the press conference today, the chief scientific advisor to the Prime Minister officer and the chief medical officer there, both of them standing on both sides, standing on the left and right of the Prime Minister, to give that authority to say, we've looked at the data, we've looked at the science, this is what the data is telling. And the data is shocking. I mean, you look at what's happening in France and Germany, where the numbers are 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. In the UK, on Sunday, for example, it was 2,900 positive cases, similar amount on Monday, similar amount today. So you're looking about 7,000 cases over the last 3 days. And that's why the decision has been made. And remember, friends, brothers, sisters, all of you at home watching this, the government is bringing this in because it wants to protect your life. And we can criticise the government and ministers, and I'm often one of them who would criticise them. But I think their ambition and their desire throughout this pandemic is to protect people. And yes, they've made mistakes, but have we ever lived through a pandemic like this before? And have we seen the seriousness that people are taking it? Because I really honestly think that many people do take it seriously. And that there's a sense that it's easy to blame BME communities and Muslims and scapegoat them because, you know, there's been an outbreak in Blackburn or Bradford or Huddersfield or Halifax or Rochdale or Oldham and just blame it on the minorities. But actually, isn't it about those same minorities who are working on the front line in the NHS to protect patients, to protect family members from this virus? And often you see that, if you remember, do you remember the beginning of the pandemic in late March and early April? First 5 people dying from the virus from NHS staff were all Muslim. And so we will not take any lectures about the severity of this pandemic and how important it is for us to follow those guidance. And you saw that very clearly with the mosques and Islamic centres across the country. When the government guidance was introduced to shut them, they were shut. There was no Tarawih, there was no Eid al-Fitr, remember that? It seems like a lifetime ago. We didn't have Eid al-Fitr Salah. And in Eid al-Adha, a big Eid, as we said last month, we did have prayers, but they were obviously COVID-19 protected. So that is where we are tonight. The Prime Minister saying, if people do not take this seriously, if you do not follow the guidance and the rules as they are now set out, then there could be a chance for more severe restrictions like we've seen in Bolton, like we've seen in Leicester. You could see local businesses shut down and you could see local lockdowns being intensified. And obviously that is not something which our economy can handle, our well-being and health and mental health can handle. And there is an increase in the amount of young people that seem to be getting this virus. According to the data from the NHS, that is what is happening. More young people are getting the virus. And really there's some work being done to look at the figures to try to understand why that is. And I just think we've got to be very careful as kids go back to school and go back to college and university starts in the weeks to come. Then those people have to okay, so what we need to do is talk to our guest, and apologies once again for the technical difficulties we're having tonight. So let's go to Blackburn and talk to Shokey Hussain. Shokey, are you there? Hello, Shokey. Okay, we're still trying to get hold of Shokey. But as I said, 01924 231 083 is the number. We really want to hear your comments, your views about the Prime Minister's announcement. It's a really big announcement. It's a real big change that we've had in this pandemic. And for those of us who were looking at the figures and thinking, yes, we might have been on the other side of this and things are getting better, clearly they're not. I'm not really making this up. The figures are going up. And they're not going up just in those areas like we see in Bolton, in Leicester, for example, in other parts of Greater Manchester. They're going up pretty much across the country. You know, you look at in the North East, Middlesbrough, Sunderland, those figures are going up across the country. And we saw in Scotland, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, announcing further restrictions in the city of Inverness and Aberdeen as well. Okay, so let's take a call first because I keep asking for calls. Let's go to the lines. Assalamu alaikum, you're live on British Muslim TV. Who is there?
Hello?
Hello, you're live on you're live on British Muslim TV.
Okay, very good.
What's your name? Where are you calling from, my friend?
My name is Danish, and I just wanted to... Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, sure. Loud and clear. What would you like to say?
Okay, very good. I want to ask you two things. You just mentioned about the first few Muslims who died in the beginning of the pandemic. They were Muslims, and I don't know what's the latest score, what's the latest count. Have there been any, other deaths as many as Muslims have? That's my number one question. Number two, Shafiq, there are too many Muslim channels broadcasting from UK. Like yourself, there's 3, 4, 5 Muslim channels, and they are always beating the bush that we Muslims, we are Muslims. If we behave good, if we perform better, they will know that we are Muslims. Why do we have to keep saying, okay, we Muslims, we Muslims? Why don't the Hindus and any other religion, they don't have their specific Hindu channels? If they, I don't know whether they have.
There are. There's quite a lot of Sikh channels. Diversity is great.
I know Sikh channels, but not the Hindu channels. And there are so many. It's a big majority of foreigners are Hindus, but they don't have any such channel.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dinesh, for sharing your thoughts. The first question was around deaths from BME communities. Well, we know from the figures, for as long as they were compiled, that there is an overrepresentation of BME people in those figures of the people who are on the NHS, doctors, nurses, and people who were affected by that. Your second question was around the number of Muslim channels. Well, I'm proud of the fact there are so many. Obviously, I want people to watch British Muslim TV and watch Questions every Wednesday nights at 8:30. But yeah, I think it's great that we've got that diversity. And you could argue it's the same with other channels. You know, you've got the BBC, ITV, Sky. So we've got lots of different channels and different types of channels. I love watching documentaries, and so I like to, watch some of them on various on the Sky platform. But yeah, religious programs, religious channels are making a contribution. But I think the wider issue which you raised is a really important point about, for us to become better Muslims, we have to be better human beings. We've got to be more compassionate, and we've got to be more outward looking. And you talked about your character. If our character is good, then people will see that goodness in us. So I want to, if you like, celebrate all those people who go out and feed the homeless, who go out from door to door to check up on the vulnerable and the elderly of their neighbours during this pandemic, to make sure that they were all right, they had enough food, that they weren't missing anything, that their medicines were fine, that the NHS was keeping in touch with them. And many organisations, from the churches, the synagogues, the Muslim community, everybody playing their part. And, it's not about ramming Islam or Muslims down people's throat, but it's actually about showing the goodness and the positivity that we can have in our community. 01924 231 083 is our number. The lines are open. Let's go to line 1. Assalamu alaikum. You're live on British Muslim TV.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm calling from London. Just wanted to disagree with your last caller, because I've seen these faith-based channels of other faiths, and they have quite a few. I mean, one that you mentioned in particular, the Sikh channel, they have quite a few. But have you noticed, with regards to Dr. Zakir Naik's Peace TV channel, they've got rid of all of them, the Urdu one, the Bangla one, and probably there was a Chinese one as well. So and I don't know what happened to that. I mean, did they go the same way as Press TV? So, you know...
Well, I don't really want to get into a discussion around that particular channel, the reasons why, because every channel in the United Kingdom has to abide by Ofcom guidance and Ofcom rules, and if you breach those rules, then there are consequences, and I think that's what happened with that particular channel. But isn't there a wider issue around the fact that there is diversity of channels? I would want everybody to watch British Muslim TV. But there is those diversity. People are benefiting from that. Whenever I'm traveling around the country, people tell me that they love watching my program. So that, in a sense, is telling you that people are seeking benefits from these channels, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, look, you said diversity. I mean, I don't just watch this channel. I mean, I do watch various channels. I just wanted, because normally they do touch on pretty much everything, but that's what I'm pretty much saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know the reasons, but yeah, I also just wanted to touch on what Boris Johnson, his recent...
his new announcement today, yeah?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused by this man, because he says one thing one day, and I mean, kind of take it with a pinch of salt. So I don't know what to make of anything that he says. I mean, I don't really take it seriously, so... I don't know about you, but I'm confused with all of this.
Well, I know we might be confused, but he sees the data. He's got the scientific and medical experts on his side, and they really are looking at that data and making decisions based on what is happening. And yet we can criticise him about the announcements and the politics of it. Thank you so much for your call there, who was our final call tonight. Thank you so much. We can criticise politicians for the political decisions that they make, but in the end, we really can't criticise their intention. I don't think any person in government would want so many deaths, would want so many turmoil, but I think they're doing the best they can, and we just have to pray that they get it right. You know, I'm trying to be as kind as I can, and I say that as somebody who's often critical of the government. Now, thank you so much to all my guests who've joined me tonight. I want to finish tonight, and I want to reflect on the programme about an anniversary that's happening on Friday, which is September the 11th. And it's the 19th anniversary. And it's a time when we remember the victims and their families. It was one of the most appalling terrorist attacks in the world. Hundreds of British citizens also died. And for me, it was one of the first times that people looked at me differently in the streets, on the tube, on planes. And it was a time when I realised that you can't sit on the sidelines. You've got to step up and play your part to defend Islam, to condemn terrorism, and to advocate for a world free of violence. So September 11th changed me and changed many of you at home, but we're resolutely strong in sending our deepest sympathies and condolences to their families and the survivors, people in the United States and around the world who died from that, and the thousands of people who died in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Syria as well because of those foreign policy decisions. I want to thank you so much. And I suppose in conclusion to the victims, the survivors and their families, we send you our prayers and love on what will be a difficult day. Hate and violence never succeeds. Division never succeeds. And love and peace, as always, will overcome. And terrorism won't ever succeed. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll be back next Wednesday with a host of other guests and other topics. Thank you to the team behind the scenes for all the work that they do. Thank you. I'll see you next week at 8:30. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good night.